Good afternoon, officially. I'm Robert Buxton, been here before. Thanks to Olivia very much for having me. And I'm going to do classical piano. I'm going to speak about the music as I always have done. And at the end I'll play gospel, play some old Southern gospel, old time gospel. So to start with, it's such a dreary day. I'm going to do something a little bit funny, which is that I like to improvise very much. It's entertaining. I entertain myself, and sometimes other people find it entertaining as well. Here's what we're going to do for today's improvisation. We're going to have a little formula. I'm going to start by asking you for a tune that everybody knows, like a silly, I don't know, some melody that every single person, every child knows. Any requests for that melody?
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Okay, that works. You want to do another one too? I mean, I could do two.
You are my sunshine.
You are my sunshine. Okay, I'll try to do both. All right. So we picked those, and now I want you to think of a composer, classical composer, who you would never imagine those melodies to be in. I think Mozart could work more easily. Somebody, maybe not Mozart, somebody you would never expect to hear "You Are My Sunshine." Brahms? That's okay. That's a good one. That's a good one. So happy birthday and You Are My Sunshine. How does it, it's okay, so let's see what happens. I'll start with the happy birthday. Brahms, he's very, what's the word? Brahms' style is very Germanic. He was from northern Germany, from Hamburg, so it probably rains a lot there too. So, yeah, very dark. Brahms is a tricky one to imitate. So, musical. Anyway, so now I'm going to play the second movement of Beethoven's Violin Concerto. This is his own arrangement for piano. I think I may have done this here before. Some pieces repeating. I wish I could bring a brand new whole program every month. I'm here once a month, but this brain is not that, So I have some new things and some old things. Mix. This concerto, there's an interesting story about it. So Beethoven wrote it in 1806 for violin. It's a violin concerto. And the first performance was a disaster. The audience fell asleep, most of them. And Beethoven was not thrilled with this, so he rewrote the piece for piano. Well, both the piano version and the original violin were sort of overlooked during his lifetime. Later, after he died, Mendelssohn especially just sort of resurrected the piece. It became maybe the most loved violin concerto at that point, and even today. But the reason I think the audience didn't relate to this concerto was it's a very meditative piece. You know, it's very calm, it's very serene, and I think that the audience didn't get it. You don't expect that from Beethoven. You expect stormy, you know. But I think the reason this music is so reflective is because he was processing the fact, he knew he was losing his hearing by that point. It's 1806 he wrote it. And I think that this is music of acceptance. It's philosophical acceptance of what's going on. And I think so that knowing that adds more depth to what this piece is about, or at least what I think it's about. If you have a chance, there's a great document Beethoven wrote. It's called the Heilige Stadt Testimony. It's a letter Beethoven wrote to his brothers describing his hearing loss and how upset he is. He was considering to take his own life even at one point. Mentions that in the letter, but then he goes on to say that he would find the resolve anyway to keep composing. And it's so inspiring. By the end of his life, he almost could hear nothing. And so the music was all just in his mind. So at any rate, this is the second movement, the slow movement of the violin concerto. It's very calm and very placid music. Before I start, I'm going to ask, do you know if there's any way to pause the music there? I mean, I could go back to the music. Yeah. I can go ask. I'll be right back. I wasn't leaving you. This. Oh yes, I got it. There's some nice music going, but I don't want these two different. Thank you. Two musics going at once. So this is the second movement of the Beethoven, the violin concerto. But this is Beethoven's own piano version of that piece. It gets confusing, all the terminologies. So, might not be what you'd expect from Beethoven. I imagine the countryside there. Beethoven loved the countryside. Actually, in that letter, the Heilige testimony, he describes being in the countryside with some friends, walking through a field, and the friends were commenting on a shepherd that was singing somewhere in the distance, and he says he couldn't hear it, and how upset he was about that. And Beethoven also wrote a whole symphony about the countryside, the sixth, the Pastoral Symphony, same key of D major, as the violin concerto. So anyway, now I'm going to play some parts of another big piece I've been working on. So I won't give you the whole thing because I haven't learned it all yet. The Franck Sonata, not Frank Sinatra, so Franck Sonata. Yes, these are all violin pieces. I'm obsessed with the violin, A, but B, I'm too lazy to learn how to play the violin. I think I've told you that before. So I play these. Right now, what I'm focusing on is arrangements of violin music for the piano solo. The Franck, César Franck wrote this incredible violin and piano sonata. This arrangement is by Swiss-French pianist Alfred Cortot. He did a solo piano version. I'm going to play it. The first movement I've played for you, I think. The second and third I have not. So those are going to be some new pieces for me since the last time we were meeting. Franck was an interesting character. He lived in the late 19th century. And unlike Mozart, he was kind of the opposite of a child prodigy. For most of his life, he was a church organist, a great one. And he was teaching at the Paris Conservatoire, but I don't think he wrote a whole lot of music. But he had this explosion of creativity starting in his 70s. And I read a funny story about him recently. Franck, apparently he was a pretty soft-spoken, quiet, humble, was probably pretty religious Catholic, Well, he started writing these pieces like the Violin Sonata, the D minor Symphony, all these really intense pieces. The Franck is, it's not light music. I'll play you some light stuff later, but and apparently his wife, I think it was the quintet, but she was at one of these runs, and his wife got mad at him because she said, "What are all those emotions? That's not you." Or I've been married to you for 50 years. I've never seen this side of you. So I thought that was kind of interesting. This sonata is probably the inspiration for a fictional sonata in a novel by Marcel Proust, Swan's Way. There's a fictional composer named Van Tuyya who has this violin sonata. It's heavily symbolic in the plot. Swans coming of age, and everything. A lot of people say it's based on the Franck. Because at the late 19th century, early 20th century, this Franck piece was it still is a much loved piece, but it was so much, the culture was like saturated with it, you could say. There's a big Wagner influence too, you'll notice. So I'll start with the first movement, we'll go from there. I've done the first movement for you before. I think of stream of consciousness. It's what it's like. If the Beethoven has sort of a logical development, Franck does not. It's more like an improvisation. And also, you couldn't say he's an impressionist, but it's borderline impressionism, in my opinion, this music. So. first movement. It's in a way, it's kind of heavy music. Here's something I think about with this piece. There's a story, I'm going to paraphrase it, that Richter, the great Soviet pianist, and Rostropovich, the great Soviet cellist, they were talking one day about a Brahms sonata, Brahms cello sonata. And Richter said, it must have been raining when Brahms wrote that sonata. Rostropovich said at the time he thought that that was a silly thought. But as he grew older, he realized the wisdom of that music is not in a vacuum. You know, it exists, the composer is a human, things affect the music, you know. And I was thinking about that today because I bet you that Franck piece he wrote, I bet it was raining when he wrote it. It just sounds like it. And besides, in Belgium, it almost hardly ever is sunny. My father was in Belgium once, many years ago, for a business trip, I think. He said the entire time it rained, and then on the last day, the sun came out. So everyone ran outside, like starving, you know, for sunlight. And then in 5 minutes, it started raining again. Anyway, I think, to me, this piece has that cause. So it's kind of appropriate for today. I'm going to play the second movement now. This is a new piece for me, and it's completely crazy. So, good luck to all of us. Me too. scares me. I feel like I'm going to vomit each time before I play it. It's tricky. And one time I played it, and a lady told me he must have been a very angry man. I thought, well, apparently he wasn't. Apparently he was a humble and quiet person, and music like this made his wife very mad because where was that coming from? Another thing, a gentleman told me something after I played this somewhere, and I liked his comment very much. I played it right after the tragic hurricane in the western part of the state. And he told me, he said, I saw some of the YouTube footage in my mind when I heard that. The rushing water, And he said, but then there are some sections in the middle especially where it gets very quiet. And he said, what I pictured there was in the background is the beautiful, still, not unmoving, the Blue Ridge Mountains. So that was how he saw it, and I thought that was very interesting, that there's this, this stormy thing going on, and then you see the beauty of the mountains. So it's an interesting way to picture it. I'm going to do one more part of this sonata. This is the third movement. The fourth is not fully cooked yet, I'm sorry. It will be. This is called Recital. It's like an improvisation. So, yeah, here's the third movement. I think this is the most stream of consciousness-like piece out of all of the movements. So. do that fourth movement eventually. It's still working on it. It's tricky to play. So we had our roast beef and potatoes. Now I'm going to play some, we need some lighter things. We need some dessert. We need some sweets. Okay, so Franck, one more thing about Franck. He was a great improviser. And there's a practical reason for this. I was thinking about it. He was a church organist his whole life. And I've been a music director of a church briefly, not currently, but I've done it. And one of the things you have to do is in the service there are spaces. Well, the biggest example is communion, where you have to you could play something, but you probably should improvise because you don't know how long exactly it's going to take. I'm thinking if he was, I think he was at Saint-Sulpice, or one of these big cathedrals in Paris. And maybe if there's 200-300 people taking communion on a Sunday, well, that's going to be a long time. So Franck would improvise on the organ for all that time. He'd have to, look and see if everyone was taking the elements yet. But I think that's, especially that last movement I played, I think that's where it's born from, that kind of improvisation. So at any rate, I'm going to play you some short other violin-related pieces, some of which I've done here in the past. This one is by Gossec, French composer from the 1700s. It's called Gavotte, which is a dance, and could not be more different from Franck. See how in about 100 years, this is about 100 years before Franck, and how different it is. Same country, France. Couldn't be more different. This piece has what I call a musical hiccup, because you have right there, and that comes up several times. It's like you're having a polite conversation at a fancy cocktail party, but you have the hiccups. And so you say, well, yes, of course, I think that, another analogy I think of is speed bumps. Imagine you're driving and you have your, espresso and whatever, and you're just having a nice drive, and then suddenly you hit a speed bump, you don't know it's there. So this piece has that, it's comic in that way. So. Here's another more light-hearted piece. This is Moszkowski. Moritz Moszkowski was a Polish composer in the early 20th century, late 1800s, and it's called Guitars. It's imitating Spanish flamenco guitar strumming. You could call this like salon music. It's very light-hearted, and for that reason, he's not played that much nowadays. I think it's too bad. I think he's a great composer. Vladimir Horowitz played a lot of Moskovsky's music in concerts, you know. So here is the piece, Guitar by Moskovsky. If the franc is like a heavy French buttery sauce, that's like a eclair or something. It's light and airy and not an eclair. I don't know what else. It's something, you know, meringue. That's what it is. So let's see. I'll do a couple more. We started a little after 2, so I'll give you your full. If you need to leave, don't feel bad. Please just do. But I'll stay another 5 to 10 minutes maybe. What should I play? I think I'll do a Dvorak piece I've done here before. This is songs my mother taught me, arranged for piano solo, obviously. Dvorak was a Czech composer, deeply influenced by gypsy music. This is from his set of gypsy songs. And in fact, he liked folk music of all kinds. When he came to this country, he lived here for a year or 2 or 3. He was absorbing spirituals and different melodies, and he incorporated those things into his New World Symphony, the 9th Symphony. So this is Songs My Mother Taught Me by Dvorak. If I could sing, which I don't, and I don't speak Czech either, but the words, the lyrics start out with the line, "I recall songs that my mother taught me, now I teach them to my children." This is beautiful. So. classical piece and then a short gospel, one or two. So this is Malagueña by a Cuban composer, Ernesto Lecuona. In the past, I played a Malagueña here by Albeniz, Spanish composer. I think it was about a year ago. But this is the more famous Malagueña. So Lecuona was Cuban, but Malagueña is a Spanish piece because Malaga is a city from Spain, in Spain, southern Spain. Malagueña means a woman who's from Malaga. And Malaga is a capital of flamenco music. It's a flamenco piece. Very famous. I think there's even lyrics to it that were added later, but guitarists play it too, violinists play it, so there's a million different versions. But the original is a piano piece, which I'm going to play. This is Lecuona's Malagueña. Here's a gospel, and an old gospel tune. I'm going to try to do it in two different styles. One is the straightforward style, and then another is in a very southern gospel, almost could sound like blues almost. So the first, it's called, you've heard it before, When They Ring Those Golden Bells. So two different styles. I'm going to play straightforward and then a little Jerry Lee Lewis or Mahalia Jackson second time. So Well, I think we'll wrap up there. We went everywhere from Franck and Beethoven to, you know, more recent stuff. Thank you all. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you.